Hello everyone. This video, I wanted to make an explanation of a review paper that I made a couple of years ago. In fact, it has been almost 3 years ago. It's also related to my PhD thesis. The title of this work was Application of the Generalized Morse Wavelets, and I put like this subtitle, no, called a review, no? So I wanted to use this video as an opportunity to explain papers because I have seen that sometimes, um, how can I say this? No, in some way. Sometimes researchers they publish a paper, but they do not perform any type of dissemination about your work or to explain some of the abstract aspects of the research. Typically, papers are like field oriented. No, we are assuming that the people that will be reading this paper are people that already have some knowledge about the topic. But in reality, this is not the case. No, sometimes people want to be introduced into the topic. So it is possible that this video, in which I want to explain this paper a little bit, um, can be divided in different parts. No, maybe I make like one, two, three, or four parts explaining this paper that it's relatively simple to some extent because it is a review. But at the same times, I will, if I feel that there are some aspects of the paper that are not correctly explained, I will be uploading a second video explaining the aspects that were not correctly introduced. Okay. So the before that, or before getting into the technical aspect of the paper, um, I wanted to make a summary of the abstract, no, that is shown here. Basically, the idea of making this paper was that I wanted to show to people that setting the parameters of a wavelet transform is an aspect that is not typically addressed in the literature. No? If you read many papers that have used the wavelet transform for performing signal classification or pattern recognition based on time series data, you will notice that in some cases the parameters or even the way in which the time frequency representation of the waveform is is performed or is computed is not extensively reported. No, sometimes people say, okay, I use a Morlet wavelet, no, I use a derivative of Gaussian, but those wavelets require certain parameters. Okay, and also computing the transformation requires certain parameterization. For example, if you want to compute the wavelet transform, you need to define the number of wavelets per octave. No? Higher number of wavelets per octave will produce a better frequency resolution in the time frequency representation that we are obtaining, but at the same time, we are increasing the computational power. So this parameter in particular has implications in the computational power that I will need in order to use that technique in order to perform my pattern recognition tasks. So the whole idea of performing this work was to say to people, okay, the parameterization of the wavelet transform is typically unaddressed, no? People made a blind sight of this, no? One of the interesting parts is that at the time that I was developing this work, I found a pretty old paper that introduced the generalized Morse wavelets. Here in this document, I also cite that paper. I don't remember right now the name of the authors, but in the specifics, I will talk about that specific section in the following minutes of this video in order to show clearly what these people introduce. And when they published this paper that introduced the superfamily of the generalized Morse wavelets, and they basically show that you can generate many wavelet types by only a single type of wavelet family. Okay, the question is, well, how can we parameterize this superfamily of wavelets? Of modern wavelets, I will say, in order to perform my time frequency representation and consequently perform signal classification. So this is basically the introduction, in which we are basically describing a little bit about the context, no, that there is a lack of focus in the research in general that have addressed this problem of how should we parametricize this wavelet transform, this time frequency representation. And the generalized Morse wavelets seems like a promise, no? Because you can generate many wavelet types by using one superfamily of wavelets. The problem is that people have used this wavelet family a lot of times without specifying why they choose a particular parameterization. And in reality, the papers that introduce this superfamily of wavelets make some explanations about it. Okay? So in this review, we basically separate the articles between different fields of applications. For example, we review some articles that use these generalized Morse wavelets for medical and biomedical engineering, fluid dynamics, vibration analysis, system analysis, electrical engineering, geophysics, and communication systems. I wanted to mention that, well, here I was trying to be specific about the particular domains, but I will say that all these applications can be um, can be covered within the broader field of mechanical engineering. So, well, if we continue, basically I make first of all a brief introduction about what is the wavelet transform. So, basically, maybe you are not familiar with this concept, but essentially, what the wavelet transform is trying to accomplish is time frequency mapping of the information of the signal. Typically, we as humans tend to analyze information in the time domain. Basically, this means that we are studying how the amplitudes of a waveform or a function or a signal change over time. But then we can use this Fourier transform, no, in order to know what are the frequencies that are composed or that are contained in our signals. So basically, what the Fourier transform is doing is to correlate the function that we want to study with a complex exponential that can assume any frequency. So by performing that dot product, we can know which frequencies correlate with our function. Basically, we are plotting that information through the amplitude uh, of this frequency. Okay, but sometimes these two approaches are useful. No, this time and frequency domain representations are useful when you're analyzing stationary data. Stationary data basically means that the statistical properties of the waveform that we are studying remain constant over time. No, we are not changing the mean and the variance of the waveform. But in the cases in which there are transients in the waveform, we want to know how the frequencies of the signal evolve over time. So one way to do that is to compute a spectrogram. The spectrogram is basically the time frequency mapping of what we call the short time Fourier transform. The short time Fourier transform varies basically doing is to take the signal and split the signal in different windows of lower size. And we can, based on these windows, we can apply the Fourier transform to each of these windows. And consequently, we can know in which times some source frequencies are appearing in the waveform. The problem is that we have a resolution limit. And that is also related to the Heisenberg uncertainty principle that states that we cannot know simultaneously the time and frequency information of the waveform uh, in an arbitrary way because there is a trade-off. For example, if we use a very short time window, we will have a better time resolution, but at the same time will decrease the frequency resolution that we can obtain through this mapping. If we increase the window size, we will have a lower time resolution, but at the same time we will have a better frequency resolution. So this is a problem because we can have increased the resolution of one domain, but we'll be losing information from the other domain. So there is a trade-off there. So one way to overcome this trade-off is to, instead of trying to fix the window size, we can change the windows size in the time domain based on the frequency. So in this way, higher frequencies will have a shorter time window, and as we decrease in frequency, we can increase the size of the window. And basically, we call this approach a multi-resolution analysis. And the way in which we are changing the size of this window is by squeezing or expanding or compressing the mother function that we call the mother wavelet. So the wavelet has this property that we can change its frequency or the expansion or retraction of its effective window based on the frequency domain. Okay. And in these ways, we can overcome to some extent the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Here I put some of the math related to this. For example, only to pro provide a brief overview, typically if we want to be sure that we are using a wavelet, well, this wavelet or this function needs to have a mean of 0. No, there is a property of a wavelet. Also, we need to obey this admissibility condition that also allow us to convert or apply the inverse transformation from the wavelet transform to the original domain that we were, well, in which our signal was given in the first place. No, we can go back to the time domain, ensuring that the wavelet that we are using to perform the decomposition obeys this admissibility condition. Okay, that to some extent basically means that the function has finite energy. And also here we are essentially explaining that when we are performing this wavelet transform, what we are essentially doing is to compute a dot product with the function that we're studying and the mother wavelet that is being translated and scaled across all times and also across frequencies. Okay, and also this dot product can be understood as a convolution. No, in fact, the mother wavelet is essentially a bandpass filter. And well, so if you can want to get into a little bit of the details of this transformation, you can look into this paper and the math. It's not extensively explained, but also I place some reference, like reference 27, in order for you to have some background about these topics, no? But from my point of view, instead of looking at this complicated math, I think that it's essential that we understand that this wavelet transform basically means that we are computing correlations, okay? A correlation with a function that we want to study, and also the wavelet that is being scaled and translated across time and frequency respectively, okay? So the greater similarity that it exists between the function that we're studying and the wavelet, no, by performing this dot product, the better time frequency representation that we can obtain, no? Because they have similarities not only in a specific time, but also in a specific frequency to some extent. Okay, we will see later, and I think that I will be uploading a second video expanding this idea of the generalized Morse wavelet. That is the other section of this paper, in which we will see that this correlation between these two functions it will never be perfect. Okay, why is that? Because of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Okay, so there will be some error, no, in the reconstruction that we can obtain. It will be lower, but we need to be cautious about it, because if these two functions do not have or do not share some degree of similarity, maybe the information that we can obtain can be biased. Because at the end, as I was mentioning before, this wavelet transform is essentially a convolution. That means that we are applying some filtering in the time and frequency domains. So maybe the information that we want to enhance when performing signal classification will be filtered out when performing these wavelet transform or these correlations or dot products in a navy way. Okay, so I think that at least this will be like the part one of this paper. And I will be uploading a second video discussing all the other sections of the paper. As you may notice, I am going a little bit fast with these explanations. But if you want to know or if you need that I expand some of the aspects of the paper in another video, I can do that. At least for now, I will be dividing these videos into the sections, not in sections of the paper, but in sections in which I feel that maybe the explanation has been extended too long, and maybe a second video can help to organize better how to read and understand all the sections of the document. Okay, so that's all for this video, and see you later.